Something I haven't done in the past year is making a new Tarantula Mythbuster video series. And today, my friends, I'm going to rekindle back the ever popular series that were once long forgotten. So since that year, I've gotten some more fresh additions, wanted to build up my experience levels and share with you guys a video of it. So I promised everyone that I was going to be doing the second most expensive tarantula in the hobby to date. It is the Harpactira pulchripes, which is the golden legged blue baboon. So this is my specimen over here, which is a 3/4 inch unsexed spiderling. So going back to my traditional way of teaching and presenting the Mythbuster video series, I do it on the blackboard. So we're going to go over species like the common name, which is important for the entry-level hobbyists who want to know what they're called. And then once you get to experience, you want to try to learn the scientific name. When you're buying tarantulas online, it's important to remember what the scientific names are, because there's places like backwater reptiles that will sell you the wrong tarantula. And it's important to remember what the scientific name is, so that way you have an accurate description of what they look like. The pronunciation, how to pronounce it, very, very easy. The availability and cost in 2016 dollars. The size and lifespan, I think everyone likes to know about that. The care requirements, something very important. When you have to buy the specimen, it's so important to know how to take care of it. The temperament, something that's really important as well. Breeding, as well as recommendations. Recommendations is my little short take on whether or not these guys are recommended for a new time hobbyist or not, and then I explain the reasons why. Okay, so let's get started. The common name, I think, is pretty universal, and thank goodness there's only one common name associated for it rather than 5 to 10 for, like, let's see, for example, in a calicodes that's your blonde. So we call it the golden legged blue baboon, and I chose some appropriate colors to identify the specimen, as you'll see in pictures why it's really called the golden legged blue baboon. It's an exquisite tarantula. The scientific name is called Harpactira. Harpactira is the genus. Pulchripes is the species. Now, don't be confused, because we have another pulchripes in the tea hobby, which is a Grammostola pulchripes. So even though that they have the same species name labeled to it, it's in a different genus. And the way we pronounce the scientific name is the following. For the genus is Harpactira pulchripes. So once again, Harpactira pulchripes. So those of you who are watching, this Mythbuster video will also apply to the other members of the Harpactira genus, namely the Swellendami, the Curvator, the Marxie, and the Bavania. Alright everyone, so I'm going to be linking this link in the video description, so you'll be able to click on it while you're watching this video. So this is a thread that I found on arachnoboards on the Harpactira pulchripes, especially breeding reports, since I don't have any experience on breeding these species, and it's also good to get the word of Michael Jacoby, the tea enthusiast and lecturer at the BTS and ATS conferences. So, and he also has over 35 years experience, so I value his experience. So you could just read this thread here. I'm going to show you just the pictures of what Harpactira pulchripes look like and why it is very sought after in a hobby, and also the second most expensive tarantula so far to date. Okay, so let's look at the pictures of his adult female that he got from Germany in March of 2014. So that's a little bit over 2 years ago. So you can see why everyone's going gaga for this species. And I can see why. It is a remarkable, beautiful species, and it is definitely one of my top wish list, and I'm so glad to actually have one specimen of this one. So the coloration is basically what it looks like, golden leg blue baboon. The gold coloration over the carapace and the femurs of the spider is very similar to what you would see on an orange bitey thing or the OBT. While the blue coloration on the feet is reminiscent of the Sarcopithecus lividus, or formerly Haplopelma lividum cobalt blue, and the other close relative of the Harpactira pulchripes, the Monocentropas balfouri, which is the Socotra Island blue baboon. Very similar coloration to that, except the Monocentropas has a much more tan coloration versus the orange. Now, this is his juvenile male that he got in summer 2014, and it looks very similarly colored to the female. However, once the spider matures, you can see that it kind of lost all this coloration. It's more of a very dull appearance. So you can still see the blue on the legs, which is really cool, but the gold is not as pronounced when he was a juvenile. And mature males will sport tibial hooks on the first pair of legs, and they use it to grab the female's fangs, so that way it will prevent him from getting bitten by the female. And as what all mature males have is the bulbous pedipalps on their feelers. So exactly, you can see the legs, the hooks are locked onto the female's fangs so he can mate with the female. Oh, maybe he does have the coloration then. I mean, superb tarantula. Okay, so let's have a look at my specimen, since it looks nothing like Michael's pictures. And this is what my sling looks like. You can see that specimen slowly is starting to show its adult coloration. The gold is slightly apparent on there, as well as the blue. Now that we established of how beautiful, gorgeous, and exquisite a female Harpactira pulchripes is, we want to know if they're available, and if they are available, how much they cost. Well, depending on certain areas where you live, Europe is always going to be the cheapest, because this is where all the prolific breeding happens. So this is why Germany and UK see prices way less than you would see in Canada, where I am from, and the US. So I'll be linking on the video description dealers where you can find tarantulas online, where you can buy them, and this is what they are. In Canada, well, you've seen the expo video for a 1/2 inch specimen, slightly smaller than my this one here. I don't even know if it's a male or female. I'm hoping it's female. These guys are expensive. So when I bought this guy for my birthday in November of 2015, it was around $200. And Tarantula Canada's last one that they sold was at the expo, and that was $250. So it is certainly not a very cheap tarantula. In the US, I've seen some for $125 to $150. Currently, Ken the Bug Guy is selling one of these guys 1/2 inch for $99. I think that's the lowest price I've seen them. So if you are a fan of Ken the Bug Guy and you like his inventory, I suggest you buy one from him. At that cost, I would buy 2 of them if I were you, because that's how much they cost here just for one of them. In Europe, Adult females, I saw them for as much as 430 euros. I mean, definitely a very nice, but very, very pricey spider. So how big do they get? So the females will get up to around 5 inches, 5.5. Very similar to what you saw on the Monocentrobus balfouri. They'll get the very similar size. The males will probably get around maybe 4.5 inches, slightly less smaller than the females, but that's to be expected because males are always smaller than the females. Lifespan for a male, let's say if you were feeding them weekly, they should mature roughly between 3 to 4 years, maybe even 2 if you power feed them. Females will probably mature around the same time frame. Now, it really depends on how often you feed them. I feed mine once a month. There's exactly like you see in my feeding videos. So every feeding video that you see is when I feed them. And so far, when I kept this specimen back in November, I only seen it molt once. So it is definitely a very fast growing species, which is a plus. However, because they're fast growing, they probably won't live as long as like a Mexican red knee, for example. Females will live around maybe 10 to 15 years, while males around 3 to 4 years. I think they should, after they mature, they should have about a year to year and a half left to live. But I can't really quote you on that because this is my only specimen of Harpactira pulchripes. So over the years, when this specimen evolves into a bigger beast, I will definitely make some videos and add more information to this video. So the care sheet on them, very, very easy. And if you have kept Monocentrobus species before, like the balfouri, you'll see that they're very identical. So this is an appropriate enclosure for a spiraling. This is basically a solo cup, deli cup. This is where you put condiments like your ketchup, mustard. I give it plenty of substrate because it's an old world tarantula. They like to burrow, and it's important to give it to them and a hiding place. So this is good for a sling, like around 1 inch, and by 1.5 inches, that is when I'll be rehousing them. So if you're going to a larger juvenile, like over 2.5, maybe 3 inches, a deli cup like this will suffice. So make sure you put ample substrate for it to burrow because it's a burrowing species. And if it's an adult, I would either house them in a 6-liter shoebox enclosure, which is something like this with a lot of substrate, again, because it's burrowing, and a cave and water dish. So very, very similar to this setup right here, my B. Amelia. That's what you should give an adult H. pulchripes and you'll be fine. If you want to house them in glass tanks, it's up to you. I think the maximum I would go is a 5-gallon. They're not very large species compared to, like, let's say a LP or a T. blondie. So a 5-gallon tank if you want to go for glass ones. If you don't like enclosures like this, a 5-gallon is the way to go. Okay, so now about the temperature. So the temperature, you would want to keep them similar to what you would keep your room temperature at, between 73, 74 degrees Celsius. I've been keeping my room around this temperature for most of the parts of spring to fall, and then during this winter time I have my heater on that goes, but not on all the time, and they'll be fine. For humidity wise, for spiderlings, it's important to give them a little bit moist substrates. So just make sure that you soak the bottom layers until they get a little bit wet, that I've shown in my watering video. As for adults, you can keep them on dry substrate, they'll be fine. Just make sure you give it a light soaking maybe once every 2-3 weeks, but make sure you give them a water dish so that way it has access to water at all times. Very easy to keep too. For if you're really antsy about percentages, like 50 to 60% should be fine. just to make sure like slings have at least some source of water. Something I haven't really introduced in my Mythbuster video series is the feeding. So what to feed your H. pulchripes? Well, no different than any tarantula that I ever fed. For spiderlings around that size, like 3/4 of an inch, you want to give them pinhead crickets. Pinhead crickets are basically crickets that are newborn and you buy them from a pet store. They're 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch. So make sure that when you're feeding crickets to your tea, make sure that they're smaller than tea, or else if it's too big, the tables are going to turn and your tea is going to die. And especially with a specimen this expensive, you really want to make sure that doesn't happen. For juveniles, like 2 inches, you would want to give them crickets or little small mealworms. Make sure that the crickets and the worms are smaller than the tarantula itself. And for adult teas, you give them crickets or superworms or B-dubia roaches. I can myself use B-dubia roaches since I'm in Canada and it's illegal to get them for sale, which kind of sucks really, but that's why I have to use superworms. Okay, so that is how you pretty much take care of them. They're really easy to take care of. As far as temperament is concerned with this species, the Harpactira pulchripes is one of the calmer baboons, just like the Monocentrobus balfouri. They'll be skittish. They'll more likely run than they do bite, and they won't be as biting your face as an OBT or the Sarcopithecus slivatus. But you have to understand that because it's a baboon, it's a tarantula from Africa, it is an old world species, so they don't have urticating hair on their abdomen, so their main defense mechanism is going to bite. And because of their ability to bite more frequently, their venom is quite potent. Symptoms will include intense pain, local swelling, extreme nausea. It depends on the individual. So you will get sick maybe for at least 1 or 2 days, maybe even a week, depending on your health conditions. So the bite of it is pretty medically significant, but won't kill you or anything. It won't send you to a hospital. Do I attempt handling these guys? Not really, because if it's fast nature and this is an expensive spider, if you drop it, it's very fragile. So I don't suggest handling it. For recommendations, do I recommend them for a new beginner? No, because they're fast, they can be defensive, and also because they're extremely expensive right now. By the time you're watching this will probably be like 2016, but probably in later dates after this video is posted, you can probably see that the price range will drop down. Same thing with Monocentrobus balfouri. Back 2 or 3 years ago, these guys were like $250 a pop. Now they're $50 a pop now because a lot of people are breeding them. So with continually breeding these species, you'll get to see the prices drop lower and lower and lower. I know TC is expecting to get more imports of these guys probably at the end of the month, but I have no idea how much they'll go for. I'm assuming it'll be around $175 to $200, so I'll call that for sure. Breeding information. So I'll link Michael Jacoby's link on the video description, as well as where to buy them online. Basically, he mated his tarantula back in October of 2014, shortly after he got his female in the summer, and by 5 months later, he had a viable sack of 50 babies. So it's very easy to breed. They shouldn't be too difficult. Make sure that if you want to breed them, keep the female well fed. Make sure that the female and male are freshly molted, just like Isabella. And by 5 months, you should have a sack. If you keep them slightly warm and more humid, you likely up the chance of making the sack a lot sooner. So definitely a nice and lovely species that I recommend. However, if you're new to the tea world, don't buy these right away. Wait a couple of years, and then the prices are going to drop. And if you want to get to the old worlds, I do recommend either this one, if you can afford it, or if you have the money. And all by all means, you have the money, go for it. I mean, you only live once, right? And it would be a nice treat to your collection. Or the Monocentropas balfouri, and now much cheaper alternative. All right, everyone. So I hope you enjoyed this Mythbuster video, and it's glad to see me back doing them as I've been doing back in the past. So let me know what you think of it. Like this video, and I'll think of what species that I've checked in my Mythbuster videos, the ones that I've covered, and the ones that I haven't covered, I'll be doing them. I haven't decided which one I'll do yet, but you'll see. Anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more vids. Thanks.